Let me share my screen. HR participants. I did not get any option here to share my screen.
One minute, let me make you host.
Thank you. Let me, yeah, exactly.
Check now.
Sure. Yeah, share screen. All right. Can you confirm you are seeing my presentation in the presentation mode?
Yeah, it's still loading. Yeah, I can see now.
Awesome. So hello everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending upon where you are joining from. Myself, I am Deepthi Goguri, and thank you so much, Shanmugh, for giving me this great opportunity to share my learnings with all of your students. I really appreciate that. So, what are we going to talk? What am I going to talk about today? Because Shanmugh actually requested me to talk something about like what like if you are a DBA, like what is our future as a DBA, because we are moving into cloud from on-prem into the cloud. However, DBA responsibility is going to change. What will be the same? What will be new? And what are the features that we need to learn more to cope up with the latest technologies in Azure? So we are going to talk about that. So who are the attendees for this session? So this session is basically focused on anybody who are new to Azure, or if you are already in Azure and if you are doing a job in Azure, this will become a really good refreshment because by the end of this session, you will learn, like I will be providing all the resources where you can go ahead and start your Azure journey. And I will be giving you the overview of Azure, what are the capabilities that we have in Azure, and how the current DBA, on-prem DBA responsibility is going to change once you move your databases into Azure. So I hope you will like this session. If you have any questions, please post that in the comment because there is a lot of content to add. I'll take the questions at the end. So as I said, like myself, my name is Deepthi Kokuri. I have been a DBA all my life. After I completed my master's in computer technology, I started my career as a database administrator, and it's been like about nearly 8 years as a DBA. And since then I have learned a lot. But meanwhile, like I have been awarded Microsoft Data Platform MVP. From Microsoft, which is really an honor. And like I also do organize data events. I'm an organizer for diversity, equity, and inclusion user group, and also I'm a organizer, the co-organizer for data and AI South Florida user group, and also I'm an organizer for a user group which is TGIF. The name is TGIF, which is Germany based, and I do volunteer technology as well. Can you all guys please mute yourself because I'm hearing the disturbance?
I'm going to mute you all, guys. If you have any questions, you can request to
Yeah, they
unmute.
can post. They can definitely post in the chat.
Yeah, and I cannot mute all. Deepthi, you have the permissions. Please mute all.
Oh, okay. How do
Yeah.
I do that?
You can see that
Uh,
option under participants. Mute all.
oh, under the participants. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, under the part. Yeah. Thank you. So I muted everybody. Um, so I'm also a volunteer for Women in Technology as well. So if you like to actually, if you are not familiar with the Azure community, there is this big Azure community under the Microsoft umbrella, and we have around like 300, more than 300 user groups, which are like striving and thriving to teach other learners, like if you are job holders or if you're new to Microsoft technologies, there are sessions, free sessions going on every month. Sometimes it will be more than like twice a month. If you wanted to join, I will definitely give you all the details where you can get started later down, later after we completed our session. So please look out for that, because this is a very good opportunity. Like once you get trained with Shenmugh, once you come out and like you wanted to learn more, it's very hard to cope up with all the changes that is happening in Azure, because every single day you hear some or the other thing coming up. And if you see all in one, you get overwhelmed. You get overwhelmed, you don't understand what technology it is, you can't correlate with one technology with the other technology, it gets too much. Like even myself, when I look like all the releases that are happening, I get too much overwhelmed. Like, oh my God, how do I catch up with all these technologies? But if you are like really like, we are in this space, right? We are in this developing space. You can't sit down and do your job as a DBA. You need to look out for the changes that are happening. So you need to have some resources to look out for. So I'm going to provide you that as well at the end of this session. Apart from my job and my company job and then my community work, I love doing arts and crafts. It makes me really happy. It's like a meditation to me, doing things with my own hands and um, being happy about it. So if you have any questions regarding this session, if you are shy to ask me questions here, and if you wanted to contact me later, please type by my name, Deepthi Goguri, or I changed my name like Deepthi G. If you search on LinkedIn, you can find me. I will be happy to accept you. And I will be also posting my blog post. I do have a blog named dbanuggets.com. I usually blog about SQL Server. I usually blog about Query Store, Azure, the latest technologies. So if you want to watch out, contact me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on my website. You can subscribe. It's free. You'll get the notification whenever I post something like a blog post. You will get the notification. And I usually speak a lot at different conferences, usually like 100% free. So if you would like to join my sessions later down the road, different topics, you can actually send me the friend request on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to accept. And if you're on Twitter already, it's a great space, guys. I'm telling you. Um, Sign up for Twitter, follow SQL family, like hashtag SQL family. You will have like, that is an entire different world for the SQL DBAs. Like there are other speakers like me and other MVPs like me. If you have any questions, like if you start doing your job and if you have any questions, you can post your question. Hey, I'm having this issue. How do I solve it? And then hashtag SQL family. Somebody like, there can be like many MVPs out there. They will definitely respond within few minutes. You will certainly get the answer to the question. Like you can find the solution. So watch out that space as well. Try to create an account in Twitter and follow the SQL family. And if you want to follow me, at DBA Nuggets is my ID on Twitter. Okay, I talked a lot about myself, so let's move forward. So I can say like 2 years ago, exactly 2 years ago, I was working in a different company. Now I changed the company, but one day, Monday, which is Monday, not so fun day to me, really. And the reason is because early in the morning Monday, I was having my coffee, and then I was checking all the job failure emails as a DBA. You know how it is. If you are doing a DBA job, there are like hundreds of failure emails, and I need to cope up with all of the servers because we have like some thousands of servers on our systems on in our company. So I was going through all of those failure emails, and I received one of the meeting invite from my management. They only invited DBAs and like higher management people, like managers, directors, and um, like architects, important architects into the meeting, but they did not mention anything apart from the subject line, like future um, our future company in next 6 months. That was the subject. So I have no idea what they are going to talk into the meeting, but as the other DBAs are there, I felt like comfortable. I went into the meeting, and I sat, and once I was in the meeting, they said like, hey, in the next 6 months, we are going to move our half of our servers into the cloud. So what this is our plan. Like as a DBA, what are you going to do, and how you can, um, provide the resources, or like, can you do this for us? And that was a question. And my face was so blank at the time. I was completely in a shock. I was literally like shivering because I am an on-prem DBA. I have no idea what Azure is at that particular point in time. I was shocked. I was confused. There are like million things going on in my mind. I might lose my job because I have no idea. And this department, like the management department, is saying like in next 6 months there is not much time for me to even learn Azure, right? But they are talking about like we have to move of our servers to Azure. So for next couple of weeks, I was in a shock. I thought of leaving my job because I thought they will hire somebody else and do that work for them because I'm not much familiar into Azure. But then I thought like panicking, thinking too much about the things that we have to do doesn't make any change. Actions will do the change, right? So I thought like, why am I even thinking like this? Forget about like shivering or like fearing for if I will lose my job or if I will have my job. Forget about that. Let me take the action. Let me start my first steps into Azure. Maybe I'll take this as a challenging task for me. It is actually forcing me to learn Azure. So why not I take that step? And I started learning Azure right at that moment. In my office hours, I took some time and I did my work. After working hours, I took my time because we can't just learn a DBA course and we can't just join the job and we can't sit there simply. We need to look out because uh, technologies keep on changing. They are keep on adding the new features. It is not at all possible to have our job as a DBA sitting still and then doing our job. We need to have that learning curve, and which is good. You know, change is constant, and change is what we want to grow in life. So as I prepared, as I started as I started learning Azure, I thought like, okay, so I think there are other hundreds of DBAs thinking the same like me, like if they are an on-prem DBA, or even if they are just starting as a DBA, if they are doing their courses like you guys. How do I tell them that it's okay? It's okay. Our jobs are not going anywhere. Like we are going to develop as a DBA. It's good thing for us. It's a positive thing for us. And how do I prove them? Because um, I was in a panic mode. I was a DBA. I was a DBA since 7 years, and still I am panicking. So how do I tell other DBAs not to panic and what steps they can take? So that's why I put this session together so that I can also assure you guys that DBA job is not going anywhere. But but there are certain things that you have to remember, and we need to be willing to change. We need to be willing to learn. And not only in DBA world, think about anything outside of the technology. Film, music, um, sports, there are constant changes. Even the doctor professionals, right? When the COVID hit, that is a new variant and they need to learn. It's the same way everywhere. We need to keep on learning, or else we can't survive, right? The life is like survival of the fittest. To be fit, we need to keep on learning. So let's see, as an overview, if you're new into Azure or if you're already into Azure, do not think like, I'm not going to learn anything from this session. This is a basic session or whatever it is, because I am going to teach you today, which you do not know before. So watch out, listen carefully. This will be by the end of this session, you will know the overview of the Azure, and then by following this session properly, you can directly go with the next steps, or else you need to visit back again to this session and watch it over again. So as an overview, we are going to see what are the deployment options we have in Azure, right? As an overview, what is this Azure? What are the options we have in Azure? And as a DBA, once we move into cloud, what are the DBA responsibilities? What are the changes? What what are the things that we need to learn more? And what are the purchasing tiers we have? Compute tiers, these are the wordings that you need to learn. The options that we have in Azure to choose for your databases are called like compute tiers, which have the compute resources like CPU, memory, IO. Those comes under the compute tiers. And purchasing tiers are like there are certain purchasing models that you have, and those are called purchasing tiers. And let's see how to create our first Azure SQL database in this session. And there are certain roles, like when you are learning your SQL DBA training, um, to give permissions to you or to others, we need to um, give the permissions to the roles, right? Sysadmin role, and then you have the reader writer roles, right? But do we have the same roles in Azure? Let's go ahead and see that in this session. And if you wanted to move your databases from on-prem to cloud, let's see like what are the tools we have to leverage to take the advantage of to move into the cloud. And finally, what are the resources from this session where you can move forward step by step to learn your like to start your journey into Azure. So DBAs like future on-prem DBAs get ready to become the cloud DBA. So as a cloud DBA role, there are certain roles that we need to be part of, like your on-prem DBA responsibilities. They are going to be the same, but they are also going to be expanded. Like I said, new environment, new capabilities. Totally, the environment itself, Azure is totally different. So your responsibilities are going to be expanded. But wait, many people are saying like Microsoft is going to take care of everything, correct? But then you need to remember that Microsoft is hosting your servers. We don't have to build, or we don't have to buy the servers, the boxes, right? And then create our databases or like virtual machines on our own. Those are not ours. Servers are theirs. But still, as a DBA, it's your responsibility to host the VMs, to build the servers in bulk. If they ask, like in Azure, we don't create one server at a time. Like our responsibilities will be like huge. Like we are going to build many servers at the same time using different technologies. You are going to build the databases. You are still going to be responsible for giving the permissions to other people, and you are still the king of the databases because you are a DBA administrator of the databases. Your roles are going to be the same and more. Certain responsibilities are definitely going to be changed, like for example, the patching, um, like the server updates, those things are taken care by the Microsoft. But the existing responsibilities, you are still going to use them. Those um, those responsibilities like the patching, server updates, like security patches, cumulative updates, those are anyway boring tasks. In my company, those responsibilities are divided from DBA. They are like taken away from DBA already several years ago. Those responsibilities are taken care by the mm, other server team, like the Windows server guys. They will do these patches and then cumulative updates automatically. So they are not, no more DBA tasks anymore. So I don't even need to bother about them, right? But there are other responsibilities for me to do. New skills, yes, you definitely have to learn the new skills for sure. So let's start with the deployment options we have in Azure. Um, so there are like two different services that are available: infrastructure as a service and platform as a service in Azure. So under the infrastructure as a service, we have SQL Server on Azure virtual machine. Under the platform as a service, we have two different options: SQL managed instance and Azure SQL database. So let's talk about each of these options in detail. So in as an infrastructure as a service, SQL Server on Azure VM comes into place, right? So it's like the similar. Little kid is crying. Let me mute everybody again. So okay, so SQL Server on Azure Virtual Machine. It is the similar way of having your own SQL Server, like a box, your own SQL box, and having your own virtual machine, building your own virtual machine, and building your SQL Server on that particular virtual machine. It's similar to that, but the difference, if you are in Azure, is that the Azure virtual machine will be the Microsoft Azure virtual machine. It won't be your virtual machine. You need to you need to purchase, like, for the service that you are using, the Azure virtual machine, you are going to pay that. And on the top of Microsoft virtual machine, you are going to build your SQL server. There is not much difference between your own virtual machine and hosting your own SQL server on that virtual machine that you buy. And in Azure, there is not much difference. There is certain difference, which is like the Microsoft is going to take care of the automated backups and the security patches. Those things you do not have to worry. Microsoft is going to take care of that. But you are still going to have the operating system access, like the drives, right? You are going to have that access. You are still going to access all the SQL Server capabilities, like SQL Server agent. It will be the same, like you host your own SQL Server. And what is the advantage of having your SQL Server hosted on Microsoft virtual machine then, if they both are the same, right? But the main difference is, like, if you move your older versions of SQL Server from your on-prem to the cloud, by moving your on-prem SQL servers into the Azure virtual machines, you are going to get the extended support that you won't get when your SQL servers are in your on-prem. For example, SQL Server 2012, uh, you don't have the support, right? So you still can get the support once you move your SQL Server onto Azure. Until you upgrade, you are going to get that extended support. So how do you actually move your SQL Server onto Azure virtual machine? You can either manually do it, or you can use the images, where you can, with couple of clicks, you can create your Azure virtual machine. And you don't have to specifically mention SQL Server. With some clicks, you can automatically create your Azure virtual machine. And by the time you open the Azure virtual machine, your SQL Server is already built on the top of it. So, or like with few clicks, you can do that. And there is also other IAS extension, which you can download from the Azure Marketplace. Um, it will unlock certain features in Azure. That is a advantage of having that IAS extension. Now let's go to the SQL managed instance. What is the difference between the SQL managed instance versus SQL Server on Azure virtual machine? The main difference here is, in the SQL Server on Azure virtual machine, you have the access to the operating system. You can access the drives, but with SQL managed instance, you can only access the instance, the SQL Server, but you cannot look into the operating system. You cannot see the drives there. You cannot access where your database files are located. But you still have the SQL Server agent. You can still have the DB mail, linked server, service broker, all of them you can still have access. The difference is no operating system access. That's the difference. Now let's move to the Azure SQL database. So here, this is the platform as a service, right? SQL managed instance and Azure SQL database will come under the platform as a service. So they are giving you the platform, like the SQL managed instance as a platform, and you are going to pay for the platform. Similar way, you are going to pay for the platform, Azure SQL database platform. Um, you are going to pay per second basis for that Azure SQL database. So on the resources that you are using, all you get is a database. You will not get the SQL server, right? There is a difference. But you might be asking me a question. So if we only get the database, how do we connect to the database, right? So there is something known as a logical server, which exactly looks like the SQL server. Like if you connect to the managed instance, like if you connect to the Azure SQL database using the SQL Server Management Studio tool, it looks like the SQL Server, but it is not SQL Server. It is just the way to connect to your Azure SQL database. So, so while building the SQL Server database, like in the Azure SQL database, if you are choosing this option, you will also have an option to create the logical server. It is not the actual server, but it is the way to connect to your database. We are going to see that in our demo. And then you will not have because you are not getting the SQL server, you will not have the access to the operating system again. And you will also not have the access to SQL Server agent, because SQL Server agent will come with the server itself, right? The SQL Server itself. So you will not have the agent. You might be asking me a question. So Deepti, if we do not have the agent, how do we actually run the jobs? Like how do we maintain our database? How do we take the backups? And how do we maintain the indexes or statistics, right? There are options. There are different options um, where you can take the advantage of to make sure your statistics and indexes are up to date. So where are we going to use this Azure SQL database, right? If you are only getting the database, like if you are building the new application, if the application developers come and say like, hey, we have this request of creating the new website and we need a new database for that website, then you are going to build the database and you are building the database from the scratch. In those situations, the modern cloud applications, um, this particular option is really useful, and it is also money saving. So let's compare a couple of the features between Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL Managed Instance. The change data capture option is not available in Azure SQL Database, but it is there in Managed Instance. Common language runtime. Again, these are all the features, couple of the features. I'm not covering everything, but you can see in the Microsoft website the literal difference between the both of them. But I have taken like important features and then I have compared it here. So common language runtime is not available in Azure SQL database, but it's there in managed instance. Cross database, like three-part name queries, like server name dot database name dot table name, or like database name dot schema name dot table name. You cannot do that. You cannot change the database name within your queries, because all you get in your Azure SQL database is just one database. So you can't actually reference other databases. So in Azure SQL managed instance, you can do that. And cross database transactions is not there in Azure SQL database, but there are like other technologies where you can use to take advantage. Like to this is not the disadvantage, but this is the feature in Azure SQL database. So if you wanted to do the cross database transactions, you can take the you can take other advantages, like for example, elastic queries. Elastic queries are the queries where you can reference to the other databases. Those are called elastic queries. So you can take the advantage of that. But as a feature, it's not there in the Azure SQL database, but it's there in managed instance. Database main, again, all you get is a database, right? You do not get an instance in Azure SQL database. So that is not there here, but it's still there in managed instance. Resource governor, again, it's a server level property. It's not there in Azure SQL database, but it's there in managed instance. Automatic tuning. This is a wonderful feature available in Azure SQL database. So basically, it will actually identify by monitoring your queries which indexes can be added and which indexes can be dropped. But the thing is, like, it will continuously monitor your queries. It won't just, like, if you run a query one time, it won't just say like, hey, you did not use this index and drop this index. It won't say that. It have to hit a threshold, like it have to, the query have to run certain number of times for it to at least give the suggestion of adding the index or dropping the index, right? Because those threshold limits, we do not know that. Microsoft internally have that information. We do not have that information. So there is this wonderful feature which is automatic tuning. There are several other things within that feature, like automatic plan correction with query store. Like that's a total different session. The query store is like a wonderful feature designed for the SQL Server. And I have an entire different session of a query store. Like if you're interested, I can provide you the link to that. You can go ahead and watch that. But yeah, it's there in Azure SQL database, but not in the managed instance. And the SQL Server agent, like I said, we will not get the SQL Server, right? We'll all we get is a database here. So the SQL Server agent is not possible in Azure SQL database, but it's there in the managed instance. So what are my responsibilities as a cloud DBA, right? The main important thing that you need to focus, even if you are an on-prem DBA or the cloud DBA, is tuning your queries. And that's the toughest thing to do, right? But do not worry because most of the tuning of your queries should be done by the developers. Like if they come to you, if anybody come to you that your query is running slow, those people are the developers. Most of the times they will write the crappy code which you will not like. And as a DBA, it's your responsibility not to fix the query itself, but um, give your suggestions, your valuable suggestions, your standards to the developers. You can go to the company, you can design your own standard as a DBA because developers need to listen to you because you are responsible to take care of the databases, right? But you are not responsible to to fix their crappy code. You are responsible to tell them that they have written the crappy code and give them the suggestions. Hey, your code looks terrible, and rewrite the code, and you can use the join better way, or you can create this particular index on your query so that it will take the advantage, like query engine can use that index and then it can run faster because developer has no idea how the SQL engine works. As a DBA, you need to know how the engine works. So it's your responsibility to suggest them the indexes, the statistics, like to update the statistics, to go ahead and look into the statistics if they are up to date. If they are not up to date, it's your responsibility to make sure the statistics are up to date. And how do we do that? We do that through the agent jobs. But how do we do that with Azure SQL database? We do not have SQL Server agent, but then we can use jobs, like we can create the jobs. There are ways you can create the jobs and schedule them in Azure as well. So tuning the queries, knowing where to, how to fix the slow running queries is still going to be needed, just like the way you are fixing the queries as an on-prem DBA, you are still going to need those skills to fix the crappy code in Azure as well. Because no matter if your database is in Azure or on-prem, queries are the same, right? Like users are still going to click on those boxes in the applications, and as you click behind the scenes, SQL queries will connect to the SQL server and run the queries. So if the code is crap, no matter where you are, the queries are going to run slow. So your application will be down if the queries doesn't run fast. So as a DBA, please watch it out. Try to learn tuning your queries, because tuning your queries, like running the like working with the developers, fixing the crappy code, giving your suggestions to the developers is really important, because it will directly impact the amount of cost you are putting in Azure. In Azure, there is no way you can buy the servers, right? Directly, you cannot own the servers. Servers are Microsoft servers. All you can do is like scale up, and like keep on scaling up and paying more cost to Azure. But then your company won't be happy at all. They will always look out to you more than the developers. They will say like, hey, DBA, what are you doing? We are continuously going ahead and um, putting more cost into Azure. Can you please go ahead and look into why we need to put more cost into it? Because the queries are running slow. And learning the learning how to tune the queries is really important, because if you tune the queries and if you give your suggestions, and if you fix those slow running queries, you do not have to use like scale up. You can scale down. As you scale down, the cost will be also, you will also save a lot of money. And as a result, the management will appreciate the DBA first, because it's your responsibility, right? So it's easy to be recognized if your databases are in Azure. All right. So let's go to the next one. Monitoring the performance, setting up the alerts, fixing any outages. Because if you are in Azure, doesn't mean that your databases won't go down, or your application doesn't go down. There might be outages. So it's your responsibility as a DBA to do all of this stuff, like automating any of the tasks, uh, working on the automation once you're in Azure, like to maintain the statistics or to maintain the indexes or to build the database in bulk, right? You can't manually go ahead and click and create the database. They expect you to work on something else like automation tasks to create those databases. So it's all your responsibility. Migrations. When they talk about migration, DBA will be the first one that will get contacted, and it's DBA responsibilities to contact the management, to contact the database analyst, to contact whoever is working with the database that you are going to migrate. It's your responsibility to contact with everybody and say, hey, I'm going to migrate the database, and these are the things that will be changed. And you are responsible to talk to multiple departments, whoever is involved with the database, whoever will be working with the database. It's your responsibility. And you are the one who will be migrating your on-prem databases into Azure, and planning the migration, putting the plan into action, taking all your databases into Azure with low downtime. It's all your responsibility. Um, so leaving some of the repetitive tasks. Once we move into Azure, there are some boring tasks that you need to leave. Like for example, Windows upgrades, patches. These are going to be taken care by Microsoft. Like infrastructure, hardware, you do not have to worry about that. Like we do not own any hardware, right? We are not purchasing the boxes like the way we used to purchase when we are on-prem. And SQL Server patches are going to be taken care by Microsoft. The automated backups, like I said, if you're on-prem, even though when you're on-prem, like these backups are taken by taken care by some third-party tools. Like there are several third-party tools that take care of the backups, um, automated backups. There are several free tools out there like Ola Hellengren scripts, which are also automated backups. Once you once you enable and once you create those jobs, you do not have to worry about until they fail. So it's anyway they are automated. So leaving those automated backups to Microsoft Azure, I don't think there will be much difference. It will make us our job a little bit easier. That's it. And automatic tuning, like I said, there is this wonderful feature in Azure. Automatic tuning will actually recommend the indexes to create the indexes or to drop the indexes, but it is your responsibility to look into the reports that the automatic tuning is generating, and it's your responsibilities to go ahead and see if those indexes are actually really useful if you drop them. Because example, like for example, you have a report that only runs 3 times a year, and you run that report you will use certain indexes, right? And then 3 times a year, done. Those indexes are not going to be used again. But then this report might think like, hey, but the query, right? I have looked into um, I have made my readings and I have suggested you can go ahead and drop these indexes. But it's your responsibilities at a DBA. What are those indexes used? Where are they used? And how many times those queries are executed? And it's your responsibility to make sure whether you have to drop them or whether you have to keep them, right? Automation doesn't mean that everything is taken care automatically. It's your responsibility to go ahead and take the action on those automated reports that are generated in Azure. Now, let's talk about a little bit about the cost, right? So in Azure, you have two main models in purchasing model, right? One is DTU model and the other one is vCore model. DTU model is an oldest model. Like when they first built the Azure SQL database, they came up with this DTU model. DTU meaning date, like data transaction per unit, database transaction per unit. I think I'm telling it. I'm I'm giving the right information. I think it's data data transaction per unit. I believe I need to check on that one. But it's like database transaction per unit. Yeah, that's the right one. So basically, what is this DTU? Meaning like you will go ahead and select like you need 5 DTU, 10 DTU, 15. You will just select the number. But what it means is like once you select the number, right, you cannot choose how much of CPU, memory, IO you need in separate, but it is like a bundle together. It's like a family pack. You cannot go ahead and say like, hey, I need like this much of IO, this much of memory in separate. You can't choose that. Once you choose like 5 DTU, there is like for this 5 DTU, you get these many resources and that's it. You can't separate how many resources you get. You 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 understand, right? But once you choose the DTU, you can choose the different tiers within the DTU: basic, standard, and premium, three different types. As you move from basic to premium, your transactions also will run faster because you are going to pay more money. But what Microsoft suggests is they ask you to choose the vCore model instead of DTU model because DTU model is the oldest model. Um, But if you want to pay very less resources, you can use the DTU model. But if you want the faster performance and if you want to follow the Microsoft suggestions, go for the vCore model. The difference between the vCore model and DTU model is like you can separate the resources. You can separate the memory, you can separate the IO storage, and you can also separate um, the compute resources. Compute resources meaning the how much of memory and CPU you are using. Those come under the compute resources. So you can choose separately. So underneath the vCore also we have three different tiers: general purpose, hyperscale, and business critical. We are going to see the difference between three of them in the coming slide. But if you are using the vCore model, you have the advantage of Azure Hybrid Benefit. So Azure Hybrid Benefit is something like, um, if you are moving your on-prem SQL servers into Azure, if you want to move all of your on-prem into Azure, if you have your on-prem licenses, right? You need to have the licenses for your on-prem SQL servers, but you want to move to Azure as quickly as possible. What you can do is you can migrate your on-prem databases into Azure, and then you can trade off the on-prem licenses with Azure and also get 40% of discount. That's the advantage of hybrid benefit in Azure. And there is also something known as a reserved capacity. For example, if you reserve certain compute resources in advance, like if you want to say like, hey, I would like to use 100 terabyte of space, I want to pay for that. Um, like I would like to reserve that particular capacity of 100 terabytes I'm going to use in future for next 3 years or for next 5 years. Then you are going to get the discount as well, like 40% of discount. And also, if you wanted to use the vCore model, SQL managed instance is the only option. You can't choose SQL managed instance for the DTO model. You can only use vCore model for the SQL managed instance. If you want to know more details, like what are the differences between two of these purchasing models, visit the source down below. Now, how do the DTO model look like in Azure portal, right? In Azure portal, all you do is like you can scale up, like you can drag the resources and then see on the right side how much it is going to be used. We have the three DTO models like basic, standard, and premium. As you move up into the tiers, you will have the more capabilities, like the performance also will be increased. Now, what about the vCore model? Under the vCore model, please remember that we have three different tiers: general purpose, hyperscale, and business critical. But underneath, especially general purpose, you have two more options: provision and serverless. Under the general purpose, you won't have provision and serverless options under the other two tiers, hyperscale or business critical. It is only available under general purpose. So, what are these service tiers that we are talking about? General purpose, business critical, and hyperscale under the vCore model. So, general purpose is used for the general uh, applications, right? For most of the business users, like for the most of the business application, they use the general purpose database. Because it is low budget, you pay less when compared with the business critical and hyperscale. Most of them use as a general purpose. But here, if you use this option, you will not, you will only get one primary. You will not get the secondary standbys. Now, what I mean by that is that like you get one database, right? You get one database and you don't have the high availability scenarios. Like for example, if your primary is down, as an SLA, like service level agreement from Azure, it will take few minutes to build up the secondary server because it is not readily available here in general purpose. It will take some time to build the secondary server. Again, this is automatically done with couple of clicks, but then it will take few minutes to build that secondary database. Your database will be down for certain minutes. And because you are paying a little bit less price here, right? But within that few minutes, your secondary database will be up and running. And underneath the general purpose, like we discussed, we have two more options: serverless and provision, which we are going to talk in the next slide. But the maximum amount of vCores that we can use is 80 vCores here. Um, and up to 4 terabytes of space you can use here. But let's talk about business critical. It is a little bit costly when compared with general purpose, but the advantage is that if you have in-memory OLTP systems and your system is really, really busy, then you can use the, like, business critical is only the option you can choose if you have in-memory OLTP systems. But here your secondaries are available readily. That means, like, you can move your read-only workloads to these readily available secondaries, and it have very low latency, meaning like your application is really fast. It is not slow because you are paying more here, right? And it is up till 128 vcores you can use it here, and up to 4 terabytes of space. That is similar with the general purpose. You can use until 4 terabyte of space. And when compared with hyperscale, this is the highest scale, right? Here you can store until 100 terabytes and more space database. And this is really fast if you choose like hyperscale. And you can do the point in time restores. And here you have 4 readable secondaries readily available. You can do your read-only workloads. You can move it to the these 4 replicas. And here you can do until 80 vcores. So if you wanted to learn, because the technology is continuously changing, um, they might add more resources to existing service tiers. Like for example, they might be changed from 80 course to more. We do not know. We need to go ahead and constantly look out for the website of, that I mentioned down below to see if they have updated anything. So let's talk about the compute tiers that are only available under the general purpose, right? The lowest budget model. So there are two options here: provision and serverless. What is the difference between two of them? Provision is meaning that you are going to you are going to purchase as a bulk. You are going to say that I'm going to use these many resources in advance, and you are going to fix those resources. Um, if you're not going to use those resources, doesn't matter, but you already purchased them, so um, still you are going to pay for those resources. But that is not the case with the serverless option. Serverless option is where you can pause the database. So what do I mean by pausing the database? Let's say there is an application, timesheet application, and timesheet application needs to be available until Monday and Friday. And let's say they don't want to use the database for Saturday and Sunday. So they can pause the database for Saturday and Sunday, and they can save the money, because by pausing the database, you only will be paying for the storage, because your database is going to be there. You're just pausing, right? So you're only going to pay for the storage, but not for the other resources like CPU, memory. You do not have to pay for those because your database is basically in paused mode, right? So you will be billed per second basis in serverless model. Like if I'm doing my demo, right, I will always choose serverless because I will do my demo and I'm done. I will say like, hey, pause my database within 1 hour. So it will be active for 1 hour and then it will go into the paused mode if I'm not using the database. So that way I will save a lot of money for my demo. I do not have to keep my database online if I'm not doing my demo, right? This is just my demo. So I will always choose general purpose. Under the general purpose, I will choose the serverless option. So this is the latest update. Azure SQL News Update, a year in review. So please follow this blog to see what are the updates since the last year. Like they have put put all the features, the latest features in one place for 2022. In December, they have written this blog post. So what are the changes that I have made from 2021 to 2022? You can all find it here. So I will highly suggest you to go ahead and look into it. Now let's talk about the security, right? Because you are a DBA doesn't mean that you do not have to know about security. It's a part of your job. Network is taken care by network admins, but still, as a DBA, you will have to know what are the options that we have and what option you have to choose once you create your database. Now let's talk a little bit about network security. So there are four different options in network security. From left to right, um, as you move up, right, like database is going to be more secure. Left side, least secure. Right side, more secure. Allow access to Azure services. If you choose that option, that means you are telling Azure, like, hey, allow any resource to connect to my database within Azure. Anything outside of Azure will not be able to connect in this option, right? And when you choose this option, anything in Azure can connect, which is not secure, right? You need to have some boundaries like who can connect and who cannot connect. So you might be asking me, like, if it is not secure, then why do we even have that option, right? So there is a reason. Like if you are building a new application and a new database and you quickly want to connect to the database without having to deal with any of these um, any of the security options layers, because it takes some time, it takes a lot of energy to make sure your database is secure. If you do not have to go through all of that, but then you want to connect to the database as quickly as possible to do some testing and then drop your database once you're done for the development, you can choose this option, because any application within Azure can connect to this database once you choose this option, not secure. And if you do the NS lookup by connecting to the PowerShell, doing NS lookup onto your database, most of the information is shown, like where your database is hosted, um, from which region, everything is shown, which is not secure. And your IP address is also shown, which is not secure. So let's talk about the next layer of security, which is firewall rules. So basically, if you're having on-prem servers, right, you are going to create these firewall rules once you build the SQL server. So you're telling basically this server can connect to your SQL server. What resources can connect to your SQL server? You are going to allow those services to connect to your SQL server and database by creating those firewall rules. In the same way, you are going to create the firewall rules in Azure. And here, as you are creating the firewall rules for each of the resources connecting to your database, you can also, like your on-prem SQL servers can also connect. But with the first option, allow access to Azure services, like on-prem servers cannot connect there. But with this option, firewall rules, your on-prem servers can also connect because you are going to create the firewall rules for each of those SQL servers, for each of those on-prem servers, right? So, but is it secure? No, it's not. Because when you do the NS lookup, still the information is shown, like where your database is hosted and what is the control ring information, what is the IP address. It still shows the IP address, the public IP address, not secure. Now let's go to the third one, virtual network rules. So in Azure, let's say you have different virtual networks. So you can connect different virtual networks together by using the technologies like VNet to VNet. There are a couple of other technologies that you can use to connect to different virtual networks. Let's say one virtual network is in London, one virtual network is in US. You can connect all these virtual networks by using like the technologies like VNet to VNet, um, those kind of technologies. There are also a couple of other technologies as well. So let's say multiple virtual networks are connected together. All of these virtual networks will be connected to one virtual network, and that one virtual network will be connected to your database. So you are going to create one virtual network rule on that particular virtual network that is connecting to your database. You do not have to go ahead and create the virtual network rules on each of the virtual network. You are going to create just one that is directly connecting to your database. And is it secure? It's still, even though we are going to create just one virtual network and we are going to have one virtual IP address, like one private IP address, The left side two options, they have the public IP address. But here, with this option, you have private IP address. But still, when you do the NS lookup, some of the information, like for example, the DNS information, where your database is hosted, those information are still being shown, which is not secure. So what is the secure one? Private link is where you will create the private endpoint, meaning that once you create the private endpoint to your database, you are going to get the private IP address for your database. So if anybody want to connect, they have to connect to this particular private IP address. Otherwise, they can't connect. And once you create this private IP, like once you create this private endpoint for your database, internet will be gone. You are blocking all the internet access. And when you do the NS lookup, nothing, no information will be shown. Everything is secure here. You have the private IP address. It won't show you where your database is hosted. Everything is secure. So having the private endpoint for your database is the best option. Now let's see how to create the virtual machine, right, in Azure. Very simple. Open up the portal.azure.com. If you do not have an account, open an account. Very simple to create. And once you create, in the search bar, go ahead and click on the virtual machine. Click on that, and then click on create to create your virtual machine. Once you click on create, it will ask you certain options, right? So if you want to create any resource in Azure, you need to always give what is the subscription ID, what is the resource group. So what is this resource group, right? So any resources, like if you want to create SQL Server, if you want to create Azure SQL database, or if you want to create a virtual machine, all are these called resources. These resources, once you build, you need to place them under a particular resource group. You can create any number of resources groups, but every resource that you create needs to be under one or the other resource group. Remember that. And then you are going to name your virtual machine that you want to build, where you want to create your virtual machine. If you are in India, create it in India. If you are in Hyderabad, create in the zone where you are located, because that will depend upon the latencies. Like if you are in India and creating the US region, then you have latencies, right? Your it will take some time to connect. That's not good. You need to create the resource where you are located, and then give the security type. And you remember when I mentioned, like in the beginning, you have images. You can just go ahead and choose the image, and you can build the Azure SQL database, like images. These are the images. What image you want to create. Here we are building the virtual machine. So you can go ahead and just click what you want to create, like Windows Server 2019 data center I want to create. So I'll just click that, and then what size do I want to choose? There are like several sizes. So I will click on see all sizes, which will give me the list of all the sizes that we have. Because this is my demo, I went ahead and I clicked on the red highlighted one, which is $7 something, which is the least option. If you see the cost, that's the least one. So once I clicked on that and created my virtual machine, I couldn't even connect to the virtual machine because it is so low cost. It is way too slow. So what I did, I went ahead and I changed that to the second option, the black highlighted one, which is $30, and it is still under the general purpose, and it have the B2S Azure users. So that's the uh, VM size that I choose. Once I choose that and I updated, it actually went fast. So I choose that, and you need to provide the administrator account and password, which should be the SQL authentication. So I give my name, password, confirm password, and I do not want to give any public inbound port, so I put as none. and then I have review and I have created one. I should also go to the other different tabs. So until now, like in the previous slide, we are under the basic tab. Like if you see, now I am under the disk tab. So what kind of disk option you want to choose? You want to choose the premium SSDs, encryption type. Um, like there are different options that you can choose. So I choose like the premium SSDs, which is locally redundant storage, meaning like it will take the backup locally of the server. So I'm using the premium SSDs that is always disk type. So I choose that option. And networking, like if you want to, like you have to choose the subnets and all the other things. Like you need to give the information of where do you want to create this virtual machine, on which virtual network. You need to give that option. If you do not have any, you can go ahead and click on new and then give the name. Subnet. Subnet is really important. You need to give the range of the IP addresses ahead of time, because once you choose the virtual network, you can create um, any number of virtual machine under that particular virtual network. But it, creating how many IP address you want ahead of time is really important, because like for example, if you choose a subnet to have like 50 IP address, you can't create more than 50 virtual machines or any other resources under that particular virtual network, more than 50 IP address. So you need to make sure you select well how many you might be creating in the future. You need to create ahead of time. So give that name, and you need to also give the public IP address. Like it is automatically populated for me for this particular virtual machine that I'm going to create. Now next, um, whether you want to, how do you want to connect to that virtual machine once you create? So I have chosen two options, RDP and HTTP. I'm going to show you how to connect using RDP once you build this virtual machine. Now let's go ahead and review and then click on create, which will take some time. It shows like deployment is in progress, and the progress is shown down below in the deployment details. Once it is complete, it will show your deployment is complete. Now click on go to resource. It will take you directly to the virtual machine that has been built on the virtual network that I have been built. Now we want to connect to this virtual machine, right? Click on connect, and remember we have choose like RDP to connect. So click on RDP. It will download, you need to download the RDP file. Now once I clicked on that, I have downloaded that and click on connect. Once I click on connect, I have given my credentials. You remember while building the virtual machine, I have given the ID and password. I have to provide that and click OK, so that my virtual machine, it looks like the entire different server. My virtual machine will be available and I can connect to that virtual machine. Now I can go ahead and build SQL server on that particular virtual machine. Now let's go ahead and create Azure SQL database on that particular virtual machine that we just built. To create the SQL, Azure SQL database, again into the portal, go ahead and search for Azure SQL, click on that, and then you will get these options. Select the deployment option you want to create. Do you remember in the beginning of the session, I have shown you like we have three options: SQL virtual machines, SQL instance, SQL managed instance, and SQL database. Now here we are going to build the Azure SQL database. So you will be clicking on create, but then this is a good way of me showing like how images looks like, right? You can automatically create the virtual machine and create the SQL server on the top of that virtual machine by using a single click, by using the images that I mentioned you at the beginning of the session. These are the images, like the highlighted screen that you see underneath the SQL virtual machine. All you have to do is go ahead and just click on which Windows machine and which SQL Server engine you want to build. By just clicking that, it will automatically go ahead and build the virtual machine. And by the time you connect to the virtual machine, your SQL Server is already there, which is very simple to install. Now we are building the SQL database, right? So we are going to choose the first option, SQL databases. So once you click on create, it will give you the option again. You need to give the subscription ID, again, the resource group information, name of the database. Do you remember in the beginning of the session, I said, if you want to build a Azure SQL database, you need to have a way to connect to that Azure SQL database. And that's when you need to build the virtual logical server. That's here underneath the server. I clicked on create new. Once you click on create new, it will ask what is the name of your logical server. Give the name and where you want to locate that, right? And then always remember that if you are building the logical server for your Azure SQL database, you should always provide the SQL authentication ID and password.
చిన్నోడినే నేను కాకపోతే పెద్దోడినా నీ ఇష్టం
Okay.
ఎలాగంట నాకు ఒక
All right. So give the logical, like you need to click on SQL authentication ID and password to create this logical server. Once you do that, click on OK. And then you are going to make sure, like, want to use it as a SQL Elastic Pool. This might be a new thing to you. Like SQL Elastic Pool is nothing bad. You will build multiple databases and put them underneath a similar platform where you can share the resources like CPU, memory, IO. You can share the resources between among all of those multiple databases. That's known as SQL Elastic Pool. It's like the pool of the databases using the same resources. Now, why do we do that? Is because we can save the money by doing that, right? They can simultaneously use the same resources. If one database is not using, the other database can use them. So it's like saving, but I'm not going to do that. So I clicked on no. And compute and storage, you can go ahead and click on configure database, which will have the different options. Do you remember? I have mentioned like what are the options that we have under the general purpose. General purpose comes under the vCore model, the Microsoft suggested model, and general purpose is the least low budget model. I want to choose that. And do you remember under the general purpose, only under the general purpose, under the vCore model, there is general purpose. Under the general purpose, you have provision and serverless. So I want to use serverless because I want to save money. This is just my demo. I want to pause my database, right? So I have to choose even that option. But then once I choose the serverless, it will ask me to choose the number of maximum vCores and minimum vCores that I want to use. So once you choose your maximum vCores and minimum vCores, once your database is up and running, it will only use the resources between these two, minimum and maximum levels. It won't cross that limit. Okay. And then I want to pause my database after 1 hour of inactivity. I want to choose that because once my demo is completed, once it is non-active for 1 hour, it will automatically go for the paused mode. Now look at right side, how much it cost me. So it cost me 0.00001 USD dollar per second. And the estimated cost is just $4.78 only if I choose the serverless option. But it completely depends upon what your company is saying because they might not be willing to pause their databases, right? So if they are not willing to pause the database, you can put on the provision model. There are two models, right? Underneath the general purpose, you can choose the provision model that will not go to the paused mode. You do not have the option over there. Now I have paused for 1 hour, and then I would like to also choose the database max size here. So I would like to put 32 GB. And then let's say like Do you want this database to be zone redundant? So zone redundant meaning like um, you will have your database available in different zones within the same state. So I do not want to do that. So I will click on apply, and then it will ask you how do you want to do the backups. So you have three options in the backups. I will give you the difference between three of them. So the first option is locally redundant backup, meaning it will take the backups in the location where your database is hosted, right? That's all it does. Second one, zone redundant. For example, if you're in Andhra Pradesh, like if you're in Telangana, if you have your database in Hyderabad, um, the backups are taken in Hyderabad. At the same time, it will also it will also take the backups in Karimnagar in different zones within that location, within that state, right? That is zone redundant. Geo redundant meaning it will take the backups in the location where your database is hosted, let's say Hyderabad, but also it will take the backups and save it in United States. It's completely geographically, it will save the backups. That's the difference. So I would like to choose the locally redundant and then click on networking. In networking, I would like to say like, I don't want to allow Azure services and resources to access this server. Do you remember when we talked about the network security, the least secure model? Like if you choose yes, all the resources in Azure can connect. That's the option. So I have choose no, right? I have choose no, and I want to create a private endpoint here. You remember the most secure option is creating the private endpoint, which will give you the private IP address to your database, and only people having access to that private IP address, like the private endpoint, they can only access your database. So it will give you an option to go ahead and create that private endpoint right here. I do not want to create right here. Later, I would like to create. So let me go ahead and um, click on connection policies next. I would like to put everything as default. And then I would like to go ahead and click on security. So there are like different available features in Azure. For example, Azure Defender for SQL. It's not free. You need to pay $15 per month per server. So I would like to say no right now. And additional settings. So how do you want to build your database? Is it a new database? Do you want to take a backup and restore it here? Or do you want to create a sample AdventureWorks database? You are going to choose that. So I would like to create a brand new database, and you have to choose the collation here, what kind of collation you want, and you have to also choose the maintenance window, like when you want Microsoft to maintain your database, because you know, right, they will take care of the backups. And once you choose the Azure SQL database, you do not have to worry about what version you are using, because behind the scenes, they will make sure your database is always updated. And this is a versionless database. Once you choose Azure SQL database, it is versionless, meaning like you can't upgrade the database. It's always upgraded. So you need to choose the maintenance window, right? It is like I can choose the default, or I can give the specific timings when they can maintain the database. Tags. So you can tag your database, just give a nickname to your database, or you can name anything. It doesn't do any action by itself. But the advantage of having the tag for your database is like if you are having 100 resources, 100 databases, by giving the tag to your database, you can see like how much money you are paying for that particular database based upon the tag. It is like easy to identify how much you are paying for that database because it is tagged with this name. Now review everything and create. Now deployment in progress. Your deployment is complete. Go to the deployment, go to resource, click on go to resource. Now it will directly take you to the database that you have been built. Now, if you observe properly, right side your screen, it will it will say server name, and it will give you the server name dot database dot windows.net. Now, what is that? That is the logical server address. Now, click on that little icon over there. It will copy to the clipboard. Now, we will go to the management studio. How do you connect to this management studio? Remember, we have built the virtual machine. From that virtual machine, you can connect to the SQL Server Management Studio tool. If you do not have the tool, you can directly download the SQL Server Management Studio on that particular virtual machine by going to the google.com on that particular virtual machine, going to the Microsoft website, download the SSMS tool. Once you download that, open the tab and give that server IP address, the server address that you have copied, paste it here. And you remember, while creating the logical server, we have given the SQL authentication ID and password. Provide the SQL authentication ID and password. Click connect. Once you connect, it will open up the Azure SQL database. It will connect to that logical server, and then your database will be shown there. The database name that I have been built is DBA Nuggets. You are going to see it there. Now, you might be asking, hey, it looks similar to the way like a SQL server. Yes, but it is not the SQL server. This is the logical server that you are connecting. You do not have access to where this server is hosted. Nothing. All you have the access is to that particular DBA Nuggets database. And if you want to add any new databases later, if you want to build any new Azure SQL databases later, you can also while creating that particular new database, you can give the same logical server name, the similar one that you already have, and then you can connect to that particular logical server name again, and your new databases will be shown there. Now, if you observe carefully, I have also other database, AdventureWorks, because I have created a new database again, AdventureWorks, and I have given the logical server name as a the same logical server name. So in the same way, you can build as many databases, Azure SQL databases as possible under the same logical server. Again, it is not the server itself. It is just a way for you to connect to your Azure SQL database, right? Now that's how I can connect. Now let's talk about a little bit of roles. What roles do you have in Azure, right? Do you have sysadmin? Do you have, what else do you have? So there are certain built-in roles that you need to remember when you are in Azure. For example, you have built-in roles like owner, contributor, and reader. Owner, if you have that option, he can do everything. He can do everything to any of the resources that you build. It can be Azure SQL database, it can be virtual machine, it can be SQL server, it can be anything. Those are called resources, right? So if you are having owner, that owner can do anything in Azure. He can read the resources, he can modify, he can also assign other users to be the owners as well. The contributor, he can only read and modify, but he can't assign other users. Reader, as the name itself says, they can read the resources, but they cannot do anything apart from that. And these permissions can be given to all the resources together, or you can just give to one resource. For example, the SQL database, Azure SQL database. For example, if you give the permissions as a reader to just one single Azure SQL database, they can only read that particular database. They cannot access any resources outside of the database. Like if there are like 100 other Azure resources, they cannot see any of them. So these are the built-in roles that we have in Azure, and these can be inherited. For example, if you give the owner at the top level, they can be owner in the with the other resources as well, with all the resources. So it can be inherited. Now, How do I see these roles, right, in Azure? So once you connect to the Azure portal again, let's say BG test server is a SQL server that I have been built. So I would like to see like left side your screen, you see access control, IAM, click on that. Click on that, and to see the built-in roles, you need to click on add role assignment. So you need to try to add somebody to see those roles. So underneath the roles, I see all the three roles, owner, contributor, and reader. If you see the description, it shows exactly the same. But you also have the other roles, built-in roles over there. But those are the first three roles are main important ones. Now I would like to give somebody else as a contributor role. Click on contributor, click on next. So whom do you want to give that contributor role, right? Underneath the members, you can add the user, group, or the service principal. Select the members, click on select members, and you can type by their email address, or you can type by their name, and then click on their names, and then you can click on next, and then give them the contributor permissions onto the resources. Like what is the scope? So underneath the scope, if you see, I'm giving the scope in the level of the server level, BG test server. So I'm giving in that test server the contributor role. So he can read, he can modify, but he can't assign the other people. Now, once I give that under the role assignments, you can clearly see Chris Green is having the contributor role. Let's talk a little bit as we are ending up this session. Let's talk a little bit about the intelligent performance. So there are intelligent performance features, which I'm not going to discuss in detail, but I'm going to provide you the resources where you can go ahead and look into if you are interested. So there are like certain automatic tuning features that are available in Azure. Force planning, create index, drop index. It will give you the report to create the index, drop index, but it is up to you to go ahead and take the action or to ignore. There are also certain tools for migration. Like once you decide to move your on-prem servers into Azure, what are the resources that you need? These are like really main important resources that you need if you are planning for the migration. Azure total cost of ownership calculator will give you the estimation of amount of cost that it will um, take for your resources to move into Azure. Once you move into Azure, how much cost you have to pay for those resources in Azure? It will give you the estimate. Take the advantage of the tool. The next one is SKU recommender for Azure SQL. So what it will do is it will this queue recommender will actually analyze your on-prem resources, and then it will suggest you whether you have to use general purpose, business critical, hyperscale, what model you have to choose. It will recommend you. And database migration assistant. If you are moving within the on-prem servers like 2012 to if you are upgrading your database to 2019, you know about this tool already. It will assess your existing SQL server, and it will provide you if you have to change any code. What are the suggestions? Like it will assist if you need to change any store procedures, like if any of the T-SQL code is not available anymore in the latest version of SQL Server, it will ask you to change that before migrating your database. It will check for any compatibility issues. That's why we use the database migration assistant. It is free, very useful. And SQL Azure Migration Wizard will actually like SQL Azure Migration Wizard and Azure Database Migration Services. These are the tools that you need while migrating your database. But Azure Database Migration Services is not free. You need to pay money for that. So, what are the key takeaways of this session? So, by the end of this session, you understood that there are many things that you are going to do as a DBA. So DBA jobs are not going to go away. They are still going to be here, and your scope is going to be increased, not decreased. You are going to learn new technologies, new features as they come, because I know I'm 100% sure they keep on coming. So, and if you want to learn Azure, right, this is the exact right time for you to start learning. Take the take the key takeaways from this session, and I will provide you the resources where you can go ahead and start your journey. Do not procrastinate, meaning do not think like I will like to do it later down the road, or like I will do it next month. Do not think that way, because your motivation levels will be downgraded. And to keep up the motivation, you need to start taking the action. Azure is not that hard to learn. At the beginning, you will see like too much overwhelmed if you try to see all the features and everything in Azure at the same time. But do not see it as a, do not see it as an overview. Take first step, simple step, easy step, where you can achieve. Like for example, you have listened to this session, which is a very good thing. Learn how to create by using the Azure portal for the first time, until you get it better. Then you can start learning how to automate things. But first thing first, you need to get familiarized with the portal, Azure portal, where to click, what to do. You do not need any coding for that. Believe me, you have seen I did not show you any code. All that we did today in this session was to do the clicks, right? So it's easy to learn. Anyone can get started. You do not even have to know the on-prem SQL servers to learn Azure. If you are just starting with the training with Shanmugh, do not stop until you are done with the training. Just go ahead and get started with Azure. And as you have very advanced features in Azure, like intelligent performance, it only adds up. It only helps you to make your life easier, but not harder. And as you move to Azure, it will save money for the company, and it will give you more pay scale, because it's not easy to maintain your databases in Azure, trust me. And if you search in Google, like what is the pay scale for Azure engineer or Azure SQL database administrator, you see the pay scale, like on-prem DBA versus Azure DBA pay scale will be too much different. Like your pay will be increased at least in thousands of folds. Like if you're paid 100K in on-prem database administrator, you're going to be paid 130K when you move to Azure, like when you work in Azure, right? Because companies started moving into Azure very drastically. Like they are moving half of their resources into Azure because it's cost saving, less maintenance, more work for DBA and more career for DBA. So these are the learning resources. I put everything together in my blog post, dbanuggets.com. Visit that website and search for Azure tab. Underneath the blog, you have Azure tab. Go to there. Go to that particular tab. You can scroll down to find these particular resources, like learning resources, um, where I have mentioned each and every blog post that you need to look into to learn to get start your journey into Azure. And these are the other resources that I put things together. Um, Microsoft have a Microsoft Learning Academy. Um, so learning path, they have learning path. Start with the Azure SQL fundamentals, because fundamentals is really, really important. Um, and then there is also um, Microsoft community in YouTube. Like if you type Anna Hoffman, like, or Microsoft Learn in YouTube, you can find the resources where you can go ahead and get started. There are like several videos. Anna Hoffman from Microsoft and Bob Ward from Microsoft, they have put beautiful resources together in the form of the video. Like if you're not willing to do learning through reading, I'm a visualized person. I like learning through videos, not like reading the books. I feel sleepy if I read the books, or if I read the blog post. But if you're a if you're willing to listen and learn at the same time, by visualizing, these resources are really useful. Take advantage of that. And all the best to all the students in this space. And I would like to um, congratulate each one of you for taking this career as a step, like taking your career as a DBA. I have been DBA since 8 years, and I can assure you that I have never turned back and thought, like, why did I take this step? Because in my bachelor's degree, I had done my pharmacy. Like I'm a pharmacist by profession when I did my bachelor's, but I never liked pharmacy in first place. It's because of my father's will. My father had a dream for me to become a pharmacist, so I had to, as an Indian, I had to follow his dream. He never listened to mine, so I had to somehow complete my pharmacy degree. But then I never liked chemistry in the first place, so I struggled a lot to end up in a technology career. I did my master's in computer technology, and while I did that, I fell in love with SQL servers. I really like working in this space, like becoming a DBA. That's how I trained. I got trained with a trainer in database administrator, and since then I really like my career. Like many people told, like you are a woman, why do you want to do the DBA job? You will be having on-call rotations, like you need to work 24/7, and all the kind of things they have mentioned to me, like to stop being a DBA. But I'm telling you, like if you really want to become a DBA, like just go for it, because I love my job, and like you will never regret. It's a continuous learning journey, and by learning something new is how you grow in your career. So I wish you all the best, and thank you so much. If you want to contact me, DBA Nuggets in Twitter, dbanuggets.com, my website, and search by my name, Deepthi space G or Deepthi space Goguri. You'll find me. And I am going to talk about many different DBA topics in the future. So I'll be posting out there when and how to connect to my sessions. So if you are willing to do that, I'm happy to connect. And thank you so much, Shanmugh, for giving me this very nice opportunity to share my learnings with your students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deepika.